Now, of late, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking a lot about dogs on this show. Mainly greyhounds, of course, after that horrific primetime expose into the state-funded greyhound industry in Ireland. But the latest proposal from the Irish Greyhound Board, for me, takes the biscuit. The board, which regulates the greyhound racing industry, has issued a tender seeking providers for so-called retirement homes. This is true now. This is not an April Fool's or anything like that. Retirement homes for racing dogs that will include secure kennels, exercise facilities, and get this now, the centres will be expected to include contact with other animals, for example, rabbits and cats. This is true. Now, my next guest was with us on the show only last Friday, but when I read this piece yesterday, I said, hey, we're going to have to talk about this a little. And before I start this interview, I can tell you that on Thursday morning, at this time, round about 10:10, we will be joined by a spokesperson from the Irish Greyhound Board. They're not in a position to provide us with a spokesperson this morning, but Nuala Donlon from Greyhound Action Ireland, the welfare organisation, is with me on the line. So, I take it, this is good news, is it not, Nuala?
Well, Joe, if I could just say, it's a pity the Irish Greyhound Board have refused so far to put up anybody to debate this issue, opposite somebody from the other side. I think that's regrettable. Joe, this is up there in the realm of the Tooth Fairy and Father Christmas, but at least I suppose it's progress that they finally admitted that there is a problem, a huge problem with dog welfare in the industry they preside over, that there are thousands of unwanted greyhounds being disposed of every year. So I suppose up until last week at the Oireachtas Committee, they were denying the problem existed, and they were actually refuting the numbers that were produced in the preferred results report, which they paid $115,000 for and which they sat on for 2 years. So I suppose it's progress in a way that they acknowledge it's a problem, but it's totally not credible that they would be able to rehome up to 10,000 greyhounds a year. It's just not possible. It's not credible.
But it's a start. I mean,
they're damage limitation.
Yeah,
really.
But it's a start. They're talking about care centres to look after old and injured greyhounds. I mean, it is a start on their part, is it not?
But Joe, injured greyhounds, old greyhounds, what about all, and 3 to 4 years old is not, it's not old. And what are they going to do with all the dogs who are born and aren't registered in the first place, of which I would reckon, and several groups would reckon, is up to maybe 8,000 to 10,000 a year. I mean, the problem is just enormous of the number of dogs they're producing. And I think anybody who works in rescue in this country, and I worked in dog rescue for several years, will tell you that it's extremely difficult to rehome greyhounds in Ireland because they're not considered pets. That a lot of the greyhounds rehomed here have to be sent abroad. And as I said, this is damage limitation. And where's the money going to come from for all these retirement homes? And who's going to run them?
Well, they said, it's my understanding, now we'll get confirmation of all of this on Thursday, but it's my understanding that they're setting aside something like €1.6 million to start, I don't know if you can say building these homes, but to start the setting up of these homes.
And that €1.6 million is going to be taxpayers' money, which, so we have effectively in this country, the Irish government, and you know the terrible problem we have with puppy farms in this country, Joe. We now have the Irish government funding the largest dog breeding establishment in the country, and taxpayers' money is now also going to be pumped in to trying to find homes for these dogs that are bred and overbred and raced until they can no longer race fast enough. I mean, it's not just an animal welfare issue, Joe. It's a public funding issue now, and I really don't know how the Irish people have stayed quiet for so long on this.
All right, now it has been well highlighted. €16 million a year comes from the taxpayer, and it's given to the greyhound industry in Ireland. I think they've made a commitment to government that they will ring fence 10% of that funding, which will go towards animal welfare or greyhound welfare in this case, which is the 1.6 million we've just talked about. But you see, some would argue that this is spin at its very best. in the form of a desperate attempt maybe to justify the funding, which I understand is due to be allocated again in October, 16 million euro. But, I mean, this is bordering on the ridiculous. In the information that I have to hand, the Greyhound Board is making the point that these care centres, these so-called retirement homes, must give greyhounds a home-type environment. Their words. The care centres must have a visitor room for potential adopters where they can watch DVDs of greyhounds, which have to be rehomed. And they talk about 24-hour veterinary cover, which is great. And children must be, where possible, encouraged to walk and control the greyhound because, as you said, they're not the most popular pets in the world. But what's this about the greyhounds must be given regular contact with other dogs, domestic pets, such as cats and rabbits?
Yeah, Joe, actually, a friend in rescue and myself were surmising yesterday that must be a Freudian slip because...
I mean, a greyhound and a rabbit?
A greyhound and a rabbit, or even a greyhound and a cat. It's well known that, and indeed, greyhound racers have been convicted of using rabbits to blood greyhounds. Ger McKenna's son was convicted of that a few years ago and actually continued to race happily for years after and wasn't censored by the Irish Greyhound Board even after he was caught feeding live rabbits to greyhounds. I mean, I think as well anybody who's worked in rescue would know that you really would not be looking for a home with cats and rabbits if you were homing a greyhound. So, yeah.
What's the thinking behind that? Is it a case of trying to make or trying to evolve almost the relationship that a greyhound has instinctively with a rabbit so that they can become more pet friendly, if that's the best way to put it?
Joe, I'll tell you, it takes a lot of time and effort if you're going to integrate greyhounds with cats and rabbits. The Irish Greyhound Board now will be mentioning the word welfare in every second sentence. You can be absolutely sure of that, because they will have to justify getting 16 plus million, which you can be certain they will get in the October budget. And you know, you were talking about the kind of care centres they're talking about setting up all over the country. To set up that level of facility, even one, Joe, will cost a lot more than 1.6 million a year. So that's what I'm asking. Where is the money coming from for this? Mm-hmm. And is the Irish government now going to, on the one hand, pump millions into an industry that's overbreeding dogs to the tune of 10,000 a year, certainly 6,000 according to their own report, and then on the other hand, pour more money into trying to find homes for all these dogs that they discard every year? So, it doesn't make sense. It's part of the damage limitation. As I say, up until last week, they were denying that the problem existed. This money the government is giving to the greyhound racing industry needs now to be given to legitimate, long-established rescues in this country to take over the rehoming of greyhounds and take away public funding from greyhound racing, because otherwise we're just going to go on perpetuating the problem year after year after year, and it's not going to be solved by building centres that they are the kind of centres they're proposing. It'll only be solved when greyhound racing stops.
All right. We'll leave it at that. Nuala Donlon, thank you indeed for being with us on the show today. In the interest of balance, we did invite a spokesperson from the Irish Greyhound Board onto the show to discuss these proposals. They were not in a position to talk to us today, but they have accepted our invitation, and we will have a spokesperson with us on Thursday's show at round about 10:10. Surely the problem is we're just breeding too many greyhounds. That's it. And of course, we have to ask ourselves the question, as taxpayers, does it make sense now for us to be giving 16 million euro a year to the Irish greyhound racing industry? Do you have a view on that? If you do, we'd like to hear from you. Joe at Shannonside.ie, Joe at northernsound.ie. There are two email addresses. Back after these.
The Joe Finnegan Show on Shannonside Northern Sound.
Joe, money for houses, for dogs, and no houses for humans. I've heard it all.